because life began to diversify faster than ever before. Life had existed on Earth for billions of years, but most organisms were extremely simple. Microscopic organisms, soft-bodied creatures, primitive forms of life. But then, a massive change began in the oceans. The atmosphere was changing. Oxygen levels were rising. And this transformation allowed life to reach an entirely new level. For the first time, complex eyes evolved. Hard shells appeared. Powerful muscle systems developed. Creatures could now move efficiently. But the greatest change was this: creatures began hunting one another. And so, Earth's first great predators emerged. One of the most terrifying creatures of the Cambrian seas was an anomaly. It was nearly 1 meter long. By the standards of its age, it was a gigantic monster. It had enormous eyes. It captured prey with sharp, grasping limbs. The trilobites were among the most common creatures of the Cambrian period. They had hard outer shells. Some could swim, while others crawled across the ocean floor. And for millions of years, they dominated the oceans. But the Cambrian explosion did not only create new creatures, it also created competition. To survive, creatures had to become faster. They had to become stronger. Defenses began to evolve. Shells became thicker. Spikes appeared. Camouflage began to evolve. Earth's first great evolutionary arms race had begun. The Cambrian oceans were extremely dangerous. Predators were everywhere. Strange creatures roamed the seas. Some had long spikes, others had multiple eyes. Earth truly looked like an alien world. Many animal groups that appeared during this era became the ancestors of modern life. Scientists still ask one question: why did the Cambrian explosion begin? Some point to rising oxygen levels. Others believe genetic changes were responsible. But one thing is certain. Without this event, complex life might never have evolved. There would be no fish, no dinosaurs. Because the Cambrian explosion was the beginning of Earth's great story of life. The story of humanity began in dark prehistoric oceans. 541 million years ago. Massive continents drifted slowly, while oceans covered most of the planet. On land, there was still great silence. The oceans were the true center of life. Strange colonies of organisms spread across the seafloor. Sponge-like creatures, primitive worms, and bizarre soft-bodied organisms. Some creatures began actively swimming for the first time. This development completely transformed predation. Now, hiding was no longer enough. Creatures had to escape. They had to fight. During the Cambrian explosion, evolution accelerated dramatically. According to many scientists, most major animal groups appeared during this era. The first arthropods, the first advanced predators, the first complex nervous systems. Nature was becoming far more complex. And this complexity became the foundation of all future life. The eyes we use today, our movement systems, even basic body structures, may trace much of their origin back to this period. Life in the Cambrian seas was brutal. A predator could attack at any moment. That is why organisms were forced to evolve constantly. Faster fins, stronger shells, sharper senses. For millions of years, this struggle continued. Long before dinosaurs walked the earth, 252 million years ago, the largest extinction occurred. the world experienced hell. Giant volcanoes. The atmosphere became toxic. Oceans warmed and lost oxygen. Nearly 90% of species went extinct. The Earth began to reshape. The climate was mostly hot and dry. Only the strongest could survive. The Triassic began after this devastation. About 252 million years ago. End of the Permian period. Pangea. Our world is still a single continent. 252 to 247 million years ago. Early Triassic begins. Earth is still extremely hot. Life struggles to recover. Inland areas are dry and desert-like. 240 million years ago. Archaea. Ecosystems slowly stabilize. A new era is about to begin. Reptiles spread across the land. Crocodile-like archosaurs appeared. Small mammal-like creatures emerged, preparing for a battle for survival. Giants had not appeared yet. Survival was the priority. The formerly dominant species had become extinct. The ecosystems were empty. This gap, it's an opportunity for new life. Resistant strains have begun to proliferate. Competition was low. Resilient species had an advantage. Reptiles began to spread. Some lived in water. About 230 million years ago, the first small dinosaurs appeared. They were small in size. They were fast and agile. They were not dominant yet. Survival mattered more than hunting. They moved cautiously in open areas. Being small was an advantage. Speed mattered more than strength. These traits set them apart. But they were still few in number. The age of dinosaurs had not begun yet. 225 million years ago, Earth was slowly changing. Large reptiles struggled. Small dinosaurs used these gaps. They could reproduce quickly. They adapted more easily. But they were still not dominant. Earth was approaching another turning point. "215 million years ago, the climate became more stable. Rainfall increased. Plants spread across the land. Green landscapes expanded. Ecosystems began to strengthen. Food sources increased. Survival became easier. Dinosaur numbers slowly increased. Species diversity grew. Small groups formed. Competition became more balanced. Earth became more humid. Dinosaurs adapted to their environment. Different feeding strategies evolved. Herbivores became more common. Predator-prey balance formed. Earth was now more alive. Rainfall became regular. Dinosaurs became more visible. But dominance was not complete yet. 201 million years ago, the Jurassic period began. Climate stabilized. Plant diversity increased. Dinosaurs rapidly multiplied. Species became more defined. Large body size became an advantage. Predators specialize. Initially, the small dinosaurs she became the ruler of the land. Jurassic is the heart of the age of dinosaurs. 190 million years ago, giant dinosaurs appeared. They are called sauropods. Earth could now support giants. When life found balance, it grew. power came not from destruction, but from harmony. Subscribe and like. The world was changing. Life endured. The survivors. Mammals were rising. Open lands prevailed. The world was shifting. Cooling intensified. The adaptable endured. $2.6 million years ago. The Ice Age began. The struggle for survival began. Cold and warm periods alternated repeatedly. Cold took control. Antarctica became isolated. The ice sheets expanded further each year. The hot springs could no longer reach the shores. Life had to adapt to the increasing cold. Polar life began. Forests have begun to be replaced by open spaces. The planet's balance was shifting. Marine life adapted. Life carried on. It was as if the world was preparing for something. And the story continued. Life accelerated. Nature came alive again. Rapport. The land dried. Drought spread. The silence would not last. The change was very sharp. Why this preparation? Years pass. It's as if a guest is coming. The house seems to be tidying up quickly. A system where only those who adapt survive. Glacial cycles began. The Ice Age deepened. The ice began to melt. The Ice Age lasted long. But the climate did not remain constant. Sunlight reached the land again. Rivers were set free. Grasslands expanded. Animals moved into open plains. Time flowed. And one day, millions of years later, humanity appeared. And humanity entered the stage. The real story begins now. The story continues. Stay tuned. When humans learn how to survive. Before we understand these ages, we have to travel back, not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of years into the past. This is our world. Travel back before humanity. A colder Earth ruled life. Much of the planet was covered in ice. Yet one region refused to freeze. The cold could not reach here. Animals gathered where life remained. Water meant survival. The first humans appeared here in Africa. Daylight was their safety. The open land meant life. But the night changed everything. In the dark, they were not alone. Running was survival. They could not fight. Only escape. Not every enemy had teeth. The wind could be stopped. Not everywhere meant death. For the first time, someone slept. Something was wrong with the stone. They had found a place the wind could not reach. The dark was deeper than night. For the first time, it felt safe. For the first time, they did not fear the darkness. They fed on wild plants and fruits they found in nature. The animal carcasses they found were their only source of protein. This was insufficient for existence. They had to organize and become stronger. The line between life and death was very thin. Survival came first. The stone broke. The edge was different. It cut the skin. Meat separated. They had never seen flesh open like this before. The smell was strange, but irresistible. Others noticed the smell. Something new was happening. For the first time, food brought them together. The life reflex is about always being. Inventions are shaped by need. He looked at the stone again, this time, not as a rock, as a possibility. There wasn't much material where they lived. They didn't have time either. The strongest species was not human. The smartest had not awakened yet. One day, it picked up a stone. not to throw, not to hide. It looked at it. Something was happening. The bone cracked, not by teeth, but by stone. They had found a new force. He struck again. Same place, same motion. This time, on purpose. He struck. The others watched. The movement repeated. Now there was not only a doer, but learners. This was not a hunt. This became a lesson. Humanity began here. They fixed the sharp stone to a branch. It became the first spear. With the handle, the blow grew stronger. Even bone could break now. They moved together through the grass, not fleeing anymore, approaching. Step by step, they advanced. The sticks were no longer for defense. They stopped. So did it. No one fled. Something had changed. They held the spears tighter. Fear was still there, but controlled. For the first time, they faced nature, together. It stepped back. For the first time, they advanced. It ran. Now the hunters followed. No escape remained. Everything was decided here. Closer and closer. There was nowhere left to go. The hunt ended. Nothing would be the same again. They were no longer prey. They had become hunters. Stone met flesh. The tool had meaning now. They cut with intention, not tearing, shaping. This was more than food. This was control. The hide kept the cold away. Stone-shaped bone, tools could now create tools. A tiny hole appeared. Nothing would fall apart again. They no longer searched for shelter. They built it. Bone, wood, and hide became walls. Nature was reshaped. For the first time, they had a place to return to. From stone came tools. From tools came life. The sky flashed. Night changed. They had never seen light like this. They only watched. The sky struck the earth. The tree began to burn. They felt the power of the fire. They touched the light. It followed them. Now the night stayed away. The night was no longer theirs to fear. They had made their own sun. From the sky came fire. They carried it, and the darkness ended. They brought the meat closer. Something changed. The smell was new. They waited. He tasted, then reached again. This was better. They all held the meat over the fire. The lesson spread without words. They tasted together. Hunger changed into comfort. The fire fed more than their bodies. Eyes spoke first. Faces carried meaning. Sound was no longer instinct. Imitation began. Sounds gained meaning. The first agreement was born. Thought was shared. Humans were no longer alone. Language was being born. Before the pyramids. Before Stonehenge. Before the invention of writing. There was something that should not exist. Göbekli Tepe. 12,000 years ago, in the heart of Anatolia. At these exact coordinates, people kept returning. Humanity built the impossible. Massive pillars, weighing up to 20 tons. Carved with predators, foxes, snakes, scorpions. This was not random, this was deliberate. But how did hunter-gatherers build this? They had no wheels. No domesticated animals. And yet, they moved stones heavier than a modern truck. How? Every strike meant something. These carvings were not crude. They show planning, skill, symbolism. This was intelligence, organized intelligence. Look closely. These carvings are not accidental. Every line has intention. Every animal has placement. This was precision, not chaos. They built something extraordinary. This was not an ordinary place. There was meaning carved into the stones. Whatever happened had to be hidden. But the earth cannot hide everything forever. In 1994, an archaeologist looked at that hill, and he did not see an ordinary mound. In 1995, excavations began. As the soil opened, history changed. This was only the beginning. The work was being carried out with great meticulousness. Less than 10% of the site had been excavated. The remaining 90% still lies beneath the soil. Some pillars weighed up to 20 tons. And the people who built them were not even farmers yet. Maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it was a calling. Perhaps temples were first built in the mines. The night ended, but the question within them did not. They began to walk. Separate groups, but in the same direction. This region had been a passage for thousands of years. They opened. It was as if they were gathering strength. This was a beginning. Ropes tightened. Tons of weight. But heavier than the stone was the decision within them. The people who lived here were hunters. When the stones were erected, it wasn't just architecture. It revealed a ceremonial space where communities came together. Excavations point to Göbekli Tepe, not as a village, but as a ritual center. It could be a connection with the sky. People were coming here. On the massive T-shaped stones, there were animals. Snakes, a scorpion, vultures. But that same night, there were shapes in the sky as well, the stars, almost mirroring the carvings on the stone. Distant groups returned. To the same place. Around the same stones. The circle was complete. But the crowd was growing. This was not an ordinary meal. It was a celebration. Archaeologists were continuing their research at full speed. Feasting remains were found. It remained hidden for over 11,000 years. Why did they hide it? The ritual began. Before they settled there, they had already built their temples. Soil preserves history. Its age was measured in the laboratory. The result was thousands of years older than expected. These stones were erected before it is believed that people settled down. History had to be rewritten. This discovery shook our understanding of civilization. The soil was slowly removed. Each layer. It belonged to another time. Bigger, older. Underground scans reveal a massive complex beneath the hill. There was a past hidden beneath the earth. Like Conley Urfa is located at the northern tip of the Fertile Crescent, one of the most critical regions in human history. The climate was suitable for life in the post-Ice Age period. It is one of the areas where wild wheat and barley grow naturally. The region had limestone deposits from which large T-shaped columns could be carved. And one day, they decided not to return. Hunters were becoming settlers. The temple was already there. Now, life was there too. Perhaps civilization began right here. Around the stones, the first houses began to rise. The walls were no longer temporary. People had decided to stay. It wasn't only houses being built. Knowledge was being passed on. They now belonged to it. The transition from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to agriculture was a major transformation. They settled. They built houses. But one day, they began to bury their temple. They did not destroy it. They did not abandon it. They hid it beneath the earth. Göbekli Tepe could be a message left for the future. History is never truly lost. It simply waits for the right moment. Stay tuned for the next episode. One night, humans stopped wandering. In the end, they understood each other. They talked about tomorrow, as if it would stay the same. They were chatting, unaware of what the morning would bring. The world was falling apart. The world as they knew it was slipping away. Even the animals were running away. And they didn't know where to go. There was no road for the first time. For the first time, they fell behind. Knowing wasn't enough to understand. They were helpless in the face of nature's power. The trace disappeared. The lands where they hunted were gone. There was no ground left to stand on. They called, but there was no response. Hunger now had a face. Hope was fading. Fear divided the tribe. Life was silently leaving her. Some returned to their memories. Life was waiting here. From the ashes, life has returned. They didn't go this time. They waited. The answer was in the ground. They tried to replicate the world. Patiently. They watched, and it changed. They did it again. The animals are back. But nothing was the same. They no longer had to follow them. For the first time, they could stay. And again. Now they understand. They could do tomorrow. Humanity changed the day it stopped. Civilization began here. They were no longer searching for food. They learned, and they taught. For the first time, they watched life grow. Days passed. The earth responded. Time was no longer chasing them. She was returning with them. They had entered the rhythm of the world. More fires were lit. More fires were lit. People don't travel very far anymore. Walking around the camp, they reinforced the walls. What was temporary has become permanent. The wind no longer made the decision. They had some difficult visitors. He walked into the wilderness. They did not come as enemies. They allowed them to stay. They fed them. A new alliance was emerging. The person was no longer alone. They had a future ahead of them. They stayed nearby. They felt like they were part of something bigger. Farm life has begun. They learned to live with life. They led the flock. Fear has been replaced by confidence. Humans stopped adapting to nature. They started editing nature. Humans stopped adapting to nature. They started editing nature. The earth responded. My hands were full. The hunger has receded. First time enough. The earth finally spoke. Their waiting weighed heavily on them. They hid the harvest. Not for today. For later. Food now had value. The value had to be protected. It was hidden in protected areas. Ownership is born. Some were protecting even more. This was no longer a partnership. They fought for tomorrow. Food became difficult. The union had ended. This chaos had to end. One voice became more important. They chose to listen. Order replaced chaos. That night, security emerged, and the next morning, society was born. Not everyone was a hunter anymore. Some protected, some produced. Some of them were no longer hunting. They were making tools. The information wasn't withheld. It was taught. Experiences were shared. A voice began to be heard. Nobody was right yet. It was no longer power. It was words that determined the outcome. The first verdict was given. The Neolithic Age has begun. Next chapter, the Chalcolithic Age. You can continue this journey with us. 5700 BC, the sun set for the last time over Çatalhöyük. In the heart of Anatolia, one of history's greatest secrets lay hidden. Thousands of years ago, this fertile plain became humanity's first great home. This place, where water and earth met, gave life to tens of thousands. On the banks of the Karsamba River, the first steps of civilization were taken. Why did tens of thousands of people suddenly abandon that giant home they lived in for millennia? While thousands poured into streets in Mesopotamia, Europe was still in the deep silence of endless forests and solitary wooden houses. The grandeur of stone had not yet begun on the Nile. Life consisted only of the river's mud and reeds. In the Far East, life flowed with the rhythm of the earth and collective serenity, far from the greed of property. Across the ocean, the door had not yet been invented. Humanity was migrating boundlessly, without property, in nature's lap. What was it that the great crowd on the roofs of Çatalhöyük couldn't fit, that they turned their backs on one another? Was that first gap between the walls a sign of a breakup or a new freedom? What did that transition period that gave birth to today's cities take from us, and what did it give? The 1,000-year experiment ended. The great city fell silent. Now begins the great void and the 1,000-year march. The earth turned bitter, the fertile marshes dried up. Granaries emptied, hunger seeped through the walls. Hearths went cold, the 1,000-year fire no longer warmed. It was time to leave. Nature was casting them out. Smoke trapped in cramped houses turned the air into poison. An invisible enemy, plagues, seeped through the walls. The price of living side by side was heavy, bodies grew weak. Now these sacred houses were turning into graves. The necessity of living in tight spaces gave way to rage. The silent harmony of 10,000 people broke with a great roar. Neither rules nor shared meals were enough anymore. The dream of living together was replaced by the ambition for independence. The great community shattered. Families broke away from the city one by one. Safe walls were abandoned. The first steps into the uncertain step were taken. Those dark holes where thousands of voices once rose fell into silence. Humanity was escaping into freedom from this giant prison of its own making. Walls were no longer shared. Houses began to separate from each other. That narrow gap between the houses was the first street in history. Humanity began to breathe and see sunlight at ground level. Now everyone had their own boundaries. Privacy was quietly being born. Walls were pierced from below. For the first time, entrances moved from roof to ground. There were no longer ladders, but thresholds. The first hello was said at the door. There were no longer ladders, but thresholds. The first hello was said at the door. The door was not just an entrance, but the first shield protecting man's fortress. When the door closed, the noise and gazes of the outside world remained behind. For the first time, humanity tasted the peace of breathing without others watching. Now we had secrets, private moments shared. Behind walls were born. When the door closed, the community ended, and the individual and family began. The colorful stones in the earth's bosom were heralds of a new power. Fire brought the hard rock to its knees. Copper melted in the glowing embers. Molten metal took the shape of a new world in stone molds. Now, not only stone, but also metal bowed to the will of man. Ketal fell silent, but the dream it built was sealed beneath the earth. Though thousands of years passed, the desire to live together never died. Smoke rising from mud roofs has turned into towers, reaching for the sky today. We are the heirs today of the great story that began in those cramped rooms. The street was not just a road, it was the first boundary between yours and mine. Humanity took its first step from a common roof to a personal land here. The door and the threshold were born. Now the front of the house was as private as the inside. The giant mound of the past was giving way to an organized order, the first neighborhood. Streets were not just paths, they were the world's first free markets. Economy moved from the privacy of roofs to the transparency of the street. Barter came to life on doorsteps. The street was a bond connecting people. Every story shared made the city grow a little more. Loads were no longer carried on backs but on wheels that the streets now allowed. Ownership brought fear with it. Now it was necessary to protect not just the house, but the street as well. Those first stones surrounding the houses drew the insurmountable boundary between us and them. The door was now being locked not just for guests, but to keep the enemy out. Streets turned into the defense lines of civilization. Every corner became a new fortress. The street was no longer just a passage. It was a giant machine holding thousands of people together. As the city grew, streets began to carry not just people, but water and the burden of civilization. Where the street ended, walls began. The city was now both a sanctuary and a giant prison. In Uruk, streets were no longer just passages. They were the first great social contract holding thousands of strangers together. Doors closed. Property became sacred. The street was now the sharp boundary between what belongs to all and what belongs to one. The sound of the wheel echoed for the first time on these unpaved roads. The street was no longer just for walking, but for hauling in trade. And then, time warped. Mud brick gave way to stone, and paths turned into imperial roads connecting continents. Light made the street livable at night. Random paths turned into a planned city. The gap between two houses was the street's first breath. Stone and gravel protected the street against mud. Crossing paths created the first public space. The cleanliness hidden under the street was civilization. The wheel widened the shoulders of the street. Climate changed. The Euphrates shifted. The street was condemned to the dust of a parched city. As the water receded, distant settlements were one by one plunged into silence. The streets became the dusty refuge for those fleeing to the city for survival. The street was no longer just a path. It was the last bastion of order. The wrath of the climate forced people to seek refuge behind massive walls. As the crowd grew, the rules of the street were carved into clay, not just memory. Records replacing words became the new and unshakable memory of the street. Information turned into an invisible power, governing the city and ending chaos. Water was trapped beneath the street. Hidden channels kept the city clean. Engineering turned chaos into health. Infrastructure became the foundation. The wheel made the street not just a path, but the main artery of civilization. Every brick was the work of a collective will that turned chaos into order. Randomness ended. The streets were now the work of a mind and a plan. The unseen revolution was under the street. The first channels gave life to the city. Speech faded. Clay tablets became the unshakable memory of the street. Millions of bricks protected the street from the chaos of the outside world. The street was no longer just a path, but the signature of a civilization. Randomness ended. Every street was the work of a mind and a plan. The story of the street didn't start here, but here it became immortal. It all began beneath this silent mound. For 9,000 years, this earth kept humanity's strangest secret in its heart. When the first shovel hit in 1958, all known history was torn apart like paper. What stood before us was not a village, but a giant labyrinth. As archaeologists gazed into that dark void, into the depths of a grave, a 9,000-year silence was shattered by a terrifying ritual. In this strange world, there were no roads or doors. The city was sealed together like a giant labyrinth. Life was on the rooftops. People lived their daily lives on these massive terraces that resembled public squares. So, what was the great fear that cut off 10,000 people from the outside world and trapped them in this breathless order? When science broke this deep silence and gazed into that dark void, into the depths of a grave, a 9,000-year silence was shattered by the coldness of the bones emerging to light. What we encountered was not just death. It was the first evidence of a terrifying and ancient ritual. To enter a home, you had to step down into the unknown through that narrow, dark hole in the sky. Every rung of the wooden ladder pulled you away from the outer world and left you in the arms of a smoky silence. When you reached the bottom, neither light nor doors welcomed you. There was only the suffocating narrowness of the walls. These houses were not just shelters. They were windowless, breathless cells where 10,000 people were trapped. Belongings were few. but silence was plenty. Everyone shared the same narrow space, the same dim light, and the same fate. The walls were so close. There was no private life here, nor a secret corner. Everyone was watching each other, every single moment. No one could be different here. There were no leaders, no slaves, but there was no freedom either. 10,000 people moved as a single soul. Everyone slept at the same time, lived the same way, and bowed to the same rules. So, what great fear sustained this perfect order that even a king could not provide? Walls were not just mud. They were woven with the bones of the wild. Giant bullheads were like gods, watching you every moment. Red paint was not just a decoration. It was the trace on the wall of a ritual, of shed blood, and of untamable fears. They did not conquer nature. They chose to imprison savagery in the deepest corner of their home and sleep beside it. Watch where you step. In these houses, the floor was not just earth, but a grave cover. They buried their loved ones right beneath where they slept, in a fetal position, as if in the womb. Death was not a parting here. The living and the dead were sealed together forever under the same roof. The story of some dead did not end with burial. They would separate the skulls from the bodies and give them a new life. They rebuilt their ancestors' faces with clay. They made new eyes from mud and pigment so they would never forget. These masks watched those sitting on reed mats by the fire. Death was right there, by the hearth, inside the family every evening. In this dark world, power came not from gold, but from a black glass born in the heart of the volcano, obsidian. They crafted it so sharply that obsidian was both a hunter's most loyal friend and the most perfect blade, two-part skin from flesh. But obsidian was not just for cutting. It was a black, misty mirror where humans first encountered their own dark reflection. The true masters of the steppe were not them, but the leopards watching from the shadows. They could not domesticate this savagery, but by carving it onto their walls, they turned fear into a power imprisoned within their homes. Wearing a leopard skin was not just clothing. It was the only way to possess and rule the most predatory spirit of nature. It all began with these symbols: power, belief, and fear. These walls you touch are silent witnesses of 9,000 years. This is Cataloic, the first metropolis with no streets and doors closed to the world. You had only one way in, this dark opening on the roof. Outside was a wild world. Inside, a life of claustrophobia. Why were they hiding? From the gods above, or from each other? Sunlight could only seep through this hole, just like life, narrow and limited. Their weapons were made of volcanic glass, as sharp and dark as obsidian. But the real mystery was hidden in the floors of these empty rooms. 10,000 people were breathing inside a giant labyrinth. They are still there, watching us and guarding our secrets. And one day, when the sky filled with fire, everything would change. Watch where you step, because they are right beneath you. They slept together. Death was not an end here. The hardest goodbye was indoors. Every house was a cemetery. He was following his ancestors. This silence has a price. Even the walls are made of bone. Why didn't they let them go? We are burying our secrets. Çatalhöyük, City of the Dead. This massive mound has kept humanity's greatest secret in its heart for 9,000 years. Today, science dives into the heart of this silent giant to map the digital past. With every brushstroke, we return to a unique world, without property or hierarchy. There were no masters in these houses. Everyone was equal under the same sky. Art was coming back to life with the blood of the earth, through natural pigments. Yet life lived in the shadow of Mount Hazen, always ready to vent its fury. These lines on a wall were the first known landscape painting in history. Cleanliness was an obsession. They sealed their walls with fresh white plaster every year. They were devoted to their ancestors, burying them right under the rooms where they slept. As the first seeds of farming were sown here, humanity learned to domesticate nature. 10,000 people wrote history on the roofs of this streetless giant labyrinth. 10,000 people wrote history on the roofs of this streetless giant labyrinth. And now technology is finally beginning to break this deep, millennial silence. But then, the climate changed and rivers ran dry. The protective fire of the city slowly began to fade. The massive population of 10,000 succumbed to nature. All that remained were the soot marks on the walls. People abandoned the city with fear and uncertainty. After 2,000 years, Çatalhöyük sank into silence. They even left their sacred figurines in the dust. No one knows exactly where they went. The roofs were sealed, never to be opened again. The last meals were never eaten. The pots remained empty. The city today is still waiting to speak beneath the earth. We are in a place where time and space lose meaning. We are touching the first great secret of humanity, 9,000 years ago. These bones, these lands, are not just remains. They are silent witnesses to a forgotten fear, a suppressed scream. But to reach this secret, you had to step down into the unknown through that narrow, dark hole in the sky. Çatalhöyük fell silent. That great roar that lasted for thousands of years gave way to the dust carried by the wind. But this was not an end. It was the beginning of a vast void. Humanity escaped these narrow walls and set out on that great march that would last 1,000 years. In the next episode, what happened after Çatalhöyük? How did humanity change in that great void? We are going to that new and wild world called by the rivers, Mesopotamia. Stay tuned. This is the lowest point on Earth, where everything ends, but for humanity, it all began. This is the lowest point on Earth. In the heart of a harsh desert, a lifeline that hasn't dried for 11,000 years, Jericho. Each layer of soil tells a 1,000-year story. Civilizations are sleeping beneath your feet, and it rises through the mist. the oldest massive man-made structure in the world. 22 steps descending into darkness. Where did these stairs lead? To protection or a ritual? They were the first masters to survive in a wild nature. When they found this oasis, the end of nomadism had come for humanity. They began to build not just a shelter, but a collective memory here. History was carved into stones and souls here, for the first time. Welcome to the greatest mystery of human history, the world's first city, Jericho. Before civilization. In the Jordan Valley, 10,000 years before pyramids, life spreads across the land. Around 9000 BCE, the Jordan Valley. Why did humans stay here? To the Levant, in the Jordan Valley. The Ice Age comes to an end. The world grows warmer. Food was already here. They returned to the same fields. They wandered for ages, but that night, the dark wasn't silent. Something was there. They didn't understand. They were afraid. Not every stone was the same. Together they were stronger. The stone was no longer just a stone. The wall stood. The wall wasn't enough. Something was missing. No one knew what it would become. Stone was placed upon stone. And for the first time, fear was controlled. A name was spoken. The first duty was chosen. He was no longer just a man. He was the first guard. The guard was alone. The sentry could feel the eyes watching him from the pitch-black darkness. This fear was very dangerous. The walls had to keep out not just wild animals, but the unknown as well. But the greatest fear came not from the outside, but from within. The line between life and death blurred for the first time in Jericho. They didn't let the dead go. They recreated them with clay. The tower was no longer just a lookout. It was a gateway. Those dull eyes began to watch the living at every moment. As resources dwindled, the peace protected by the walls turned bloody. Only the sound of stone and bone was heard. At sunrise, Jericho was no longer the same. The first city had become humanity's first prison. Jericho's greatest secret was not outside the walls or in the tower. It was right beneath the houses. They didn't bury their dead far away. They lived with them under the same roof, beneath their feet. But after a while, the graves were opened. The skulls were separated from the bodies. But after a while, the graves were opened. The skulls were separated from the bodies. Was it respect or an attempt to bring them back? They gave the skulls life again with clay. Cowrie shells were placed in the eye sockets. Now those voids had begun to look back again. These masked skulls were placed in the corner of the house, among the living. The world's first city was hosting the world's first spirit summoning rituals. Even 11,000 years later, these faces ask us the same question. Were they afraid of death, or did they want to rule it? Wild beasts, or enemy tribes? Jericho sealed its fears with walls. Harsh hunt outside, civilization inside. Who were these walls truly for? Jericho's people shut the world out. The greatest secrets lay underground. Silent guardians, plastered skulls. Their ancestors were still watching. Is this legacy from Quebec? The first portraits carved on bone. Why strive so hard to be remembered? Did the war with death begin here? A deep mystery at the world's lowest point. Jericho, mankind's first great trial. The locks of the past are opening. The mystery inside, the giant tower. 22 steps, the first stairs to heaven. A defense line, or a giant calendar. Salt from the Dead Sea, white gold. Obsidian and stones from distant lands. Wealth brought great threats with it. The city fell, but was never abandoned. New houses rose upon ancestral remains. Jericho, 20 layers of different lives. Humanity discovered property here. This ancient legacy still lives within us. The voices are fading. The fire no longer warms. Like life, those who are gone are missed. Those we miss are among us. Even those are missing. No one left to watch for. The walls no longer protect us. The traces remain. They built an 8-meter-high wall. They took them with them so they wouldn't forget their dead. They laid the foundation for modern agriculture. They hunted. Then one day, they left in small numbers. The rest, with questions. They left us alone. Fear shapes life. And now we know that. They shaped death too. A vast history. 1/6 of the desert soil. She waited to enlighten us. They hid. They lived. They left. The next episode, Ketal Yuk, the cradle of civilization. Legend says a gardener found a baby in a basket. This child would change history. The river chose him, not the palace. Before empire, there were only cities. Before empires, there was chaos between the rivers, and among them, a servant. He learned how power truly worked. He watched power from the shadows. He felt the power. He was crushed under the weight of that power. He wanted more than survival. Into the unknown. He walked away from his past. The gates of my prison have finally closed. The air of the desert tastes like blood and freedom. He arrived at Kish. There he found war. War was discipline. He learned quickly. Men began to follow him. Order began to crack. Power changed hands. Sargon became king. But one city was not enough. He marched beyond borders. Cities fell. Others surrendered. They did not wait for dawn. Night provided the ultimate cover for Aki. Silence was their weapon. They scaled the walls before the alarm rose. The city's fate was sealed from within. Step by step, the wall lost its power. A name lost to the sands of time, AKD, the world's first empire. Before them, there was only chaos, independent cities, locked in eternal conflict. The gates were breached. The city was no longer its own. And Uruk was only the beginning. Another city stood in their path. One city fell, and the next one trembled. The march did not stop. Walls meant nothing now. Another gate, another city broken. This was not chaos. It was command. Sargon stood above them all. The age of kings had changed. Sargon reached the sea with the bronze sun of Shamash leading his way. The era of city-states ended. The era of the World King began. The Akkadian Empire had now been established. Sargon's conquests had united the city-states. Independent cities were now under a single power. It was one of the first great empires in history. Vast lands were united under a single rule. New roads were opened between cities. Caravans carried goods between cities. Trade brought life to Mesopotamia. Communication across the empire became faster. Cities were now connected. News traveled from distant cities. Akkad introduced the first standardized weight and measure system. Centralized administration was managed through thousands of clay records. The state controlled the grain, creating the world's first tax system. The world's first postal system was born, in the desert, connecting distant provinces. Clay envelopes ensured the confidentiality of imperial orders. A sealed system allowed the central government to control the flow of information. Akkadian became the world's first diplomatic language. A common identity was forged through shared laws and faith. In Mesopotamia, people carefully observed the sky. The movements of stars and planets were recorded on clay tablets. These observations later formed the foundations of astrology. Akkadian trade routes reached the distant lands of Magan and Malup. During the Akkadian period, trade ships carried goods to the ports. Cities traded with distant regions. Scribes recorded incoming goods on clay tablets. Trade had become a system carefully documented. Trade routes connected Mesopotamia. Goods constantly moved across the land. Copper and stone were valuable trade goods. Precious goods were sold in markets. Trade brought wealth. Governors were appointed in cities. A new administration was established. Taxes were collected. The state controlled the economy. Trade was recorded. Scribes kept official records. Clay tablets stored information. State organization became stronger. Cities began to prosper. Trade brought life to the cities. The economy was strong. But the empire would not stay strong forever. Problems slowly appeared. A great change was coming. Rebellions began to shake the empire. Unrest grew inside the cities. Cracks appeared within the empire. Distant cities became harder to control. The empire had grown too large. Governing became more difficult. The Gutian tribes came from the north. A new threat appeared. Warriors descended from the mountains. Wars weakened the empire. Cities were under attack. Defense became harder. The Akkadian Empire finally collapsed. Mesopotamia fragmented again. But its idea endured. The concept of empire lived on in history. The Akkadian legacy remained. Thousands of years later, the story of Akkad emerged again from beneath the sands. Through archaeology, the Akkadian Empire was remembered again. Follow for the next chapter. History began with a question asked between two rivers. Sumer cradle of civilization, where rivers were tamed and time measured. They didn't just survive, they recorded human memory. Law, math, and time were born here. They controlled the rivers and built an empire. Logistics was born here. The wheel-powered trade. Bricks built the first state. Wealth became numbers, power became records. They divided time itself. The hour was born. They mapped the sky. The circle was defined. Writing began to tell stories and laws. The first hero, Gilgamesh, seeking immortality. Enlil roared, the great flood came. Cities served the gods, humans obeyed. Even kings feared the dusty underworld. Their myths shaped humanity. They fought for water, not unity. Internal wars ended their golden age. Drought turned nature into their enemy. A northern power would replace the cities. Every civilization is a continuation of a memory. Thousands of years earlier, humans did not know cities, but they had learned to live together. This was not a world of walls. It was a world of people leaning on each other. No streets, no doors, only life on the rooftops. Life began on the rooftops. A streetless human hive. Change broke the old safety. In 5000 BC, the first souls took a leap of faith. They walked away from the only home they knew, heading south toward the wild marshes. They were not searching for a place. They were searching for a way to live. And they found water. But water was not life. Water was chaos. Then someone cut the earth. They mastered water with engineering. The wheel began a new era. The first Sumerian city, Uruk, began the Bronze Age. Before civilization, only rivers existed here. Humans had not yet built cities. This land was older than the Sumerians. Sometimes the water gave life. Sometimes it took everything away. Humans here were not against nature. They were learning to live with it. Humans tried to stop the water. Alone, it was impossible. The land was no longer just plowed. A path was given to the water. Nature was changing direction for the first time. The homes began to multiply. People no longer lived alone. Neighborhoods appeared. Shared spaces formed. Someone began to guide it. They built the first skyscrapers. Writing was born from accounting. They turned stars into numbers. Water clocks measured the night. They created the 360-degree circle. Edaba trained the first administrators. Information became power through records. Writing became art and poetry. Rivers created a trade empire. They created the state treasury system. They created the first medicines. The cedar plow fed the first cities. Patterns became a visual language. The first global market was born. Law replaced tribal rule. Grain became the first wealth. Bronze gave them power. Taxes became a sacred duty. They connected east and west by sea. Sumerian cities were the Venices of the ancient world. A city raised against the desert. War became an organized force. The first army marched as one. Survival was decided in bronze. Sumer didn't die, it waited. Under the silent dunes of Mesopotamia, their words were preserved in clay. While empires of stone crumbled into dust, these humble tablets kept the secrets of the first stars, the first laws, and the first stories of mankind. They are the ghosts in our clocks, the logic in our laws, and the ink in our history. Sumerians may have vanished into the desert, but as long as we write, calculate, and look at the stars, they live within us. Sumer's chapter ends here, but the storm of history is just beginning. In our next episode, the world's first empire rises from these very sands. The Akkadian Empire witnessed the dawn of King Sargon and the birth of a new era. For the complete story of our world, don't miss our playlist, a chronological journey from Earth's creation to today. You will love exploring how every piece of the puzzle fits together. Stay tuned for the full chronology. Mesopotamia was one of the lands where the earliest civilizations in human history were born. Around 2000 BCE, in the heart of Mesopotamia, a small city was rising. Its name was Babylon. Babylon stood in the very heart of Mesopotamia. Its position along the Euphrates River played a crucial role in the city's rise. Trade routes passed through Babylon. Merchants from distant lands came to sell their goods in this city. The markets of the city filled with crowds every day. Grain, textiles, and precious goods changed hands in Babylon. The market in Babylon had a rich variety of goods. As Babylon grew, the city walls rose higher. Strong fortifications protected the city from its enemies. Buildings began to rise. Over time, Babylon was no longer a small city. It had become one of the most powerful centers in Mesopotamia. Soon, a powerful king rose to the throne of Babylon. His name was Hammurabi. Hammurabi wanted to turn Babylon into a powerful empire. For that, he first strengthened his army. Hammurabi sent his armies across Mesopotamia. The power of Babylon began to spread rapidly. Many cities, Babil Ordusunakar, Koyamat, Lar, Hammurabi's conquests began to change the fate of Mesopotamia. Cities, one by one, fell under Babylonian rule. Hammurabi's kingdom was becoming a vast empire. Hammurabi had turned Babylon into the most powerful state in Mesopotamia. His rule now stretched across vast lands. Hammurabi was not only a conqueror, he would also become one of the most famous lawgivers in history. Hammurabi carved his laws onto a great stone pillar. In Babylon, everyone could see the rules. Babylonian scribes wrote the laws onto clay tablets. In this way, the rules could pass from generation to generation. Hammurabi's laws formed the foundation of justice in Babylon. People were now judged according to written rules. These laws were extremely strict. The most famous rule was simple: an eye for an eye. Babylon was not only a city of kings and armies. In its streets, thousands of people lived their daily lives. In Babylon, craftsmen worked throughout the day. Pottery, textiles, and many goods were produced in these workshops. The Euphrates River was like a great trade route for Babylon. Goods and wealth traveled along its waters. For the people of Babylon, the gods were of great importance. Ceremonies in the temples stood at the center of the city's life. From the top of the great temples, Babylon looked like a vast city. Its streets were full of life. Babylonian priests carefully studied the night sky. The movement of the stars held great meaning for them. Babylonian scholars also made great progress in mathematics. Numbers and calculations were recorded on clay tablets. Babylonian mathematics was based on a base 16 number system. Even today, we still use it to measure time. One of the most famous stories about Babylon is the Hanging Gardens. These gardens were considered one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. Keeping these gardens alive was not easy. Water was lifted from the Euphrates River and carried up to the terraces. The Hanging Gardens symbolize the grandeur of Babylon. Green terraces rose like a miracle in the middle of the desert. At one time, Babylon was the most powerful city in Mesopotamia. Its wealth and power were known across distant lands. Ruling Babylon was a great responsibility. Officials and scribes worked to maintain order across the empire. Envoys from distant kingdoms arrived at the palace of Babylon with gifts. These visits showed the city's power and influence. But over time, the power of Babylon began to fade. The empire was no longer as strong as before. The Persians first faced the Babylonian army outside the city. In the Battle of Opis, Babylon's forces suffered a crushing defeat. From the east, a new and powerful empire was rising. The Persians were moving toward Mesopotamia. The Persian armies finally reached the walls of Babylon, one of the greatest cities in history. Now faced a great danger. In 539 BCE, the Persians entered Babylon. The once mighty empire was now under the rule of a new power. Babylon was now part of the Persian Empire. Yet the city had not completely lost its importance. Babylon was no longer the capital of a great empire. Yet the city continued as a center of trade and culture. Babylon was no longer an empire. Yet the city continued to live as a center of trade and knowledge. As the centuries passed, Babylon slowly lost its former power. The once great city was beginning to fall silent. In time, people began to leave Babylon. The great city was slowly sinking into silence. As the centuries passed, Babylon slowly fell into silence. The once magnificent city remained only as ruins. Today, little remains of the once magnificent city of Babylon, yet its story continues as one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Follow the channel to explore more great civilizations of world history. This story began in Mesopotamia, in a city on the banks of the Tigris River. In northern Mesopotamia, a small settlement was rising along the banks of the Tigris River. Over time, this settlement grew and became the city of Ashur, the heart of the Assyrian people. Ashur was not a war empire at the beginning. It was a city of merchants and caravans. They brought tin and textiles from Mesopotamia. They would buy silver and gold from Anatolia. At first, the Assyrians were not a great empire. They were a people who grew powerful through trade. Assyrian merchants reached Anatolia and established trade colonies there. Through trade, Assyrian cities quickly became wealthy. Over time, powerful kings emerged, and Assyria began to become a centralized power. Assyrian kings began to build a powerful and disciplined army. Discipline was everything. They regularly put the knowledge into practice. Iron weapons gave the Assyrian army a powerful advantage. The Assyrians mastered ironworking and produced a wide variety of weapons for their army. The Assyrian army used many different types of weapons for various kinds of warfare. Each soldier was equipped with different weapons depending on their role on the battlefield. Special weapons for special forces. Weapon diversity and military discipline made the Assyrian army one of the most powerful forces of its time. War chariots were one of the most powerful weapons of the Assyrian army. Using a war chariot required great training and skill. Success in a war chariot required perfect coordination between the driver and the warrior. They were working in difficult terrain. War chariots changed the nature of warfare with speed, mobility, and ranged attacks. The Assyrian army gained a decisive advantage over its enemies. The Assyrian army was disciplined and powerful. The Assyrians mastered siege warfare and were able to conquer even the strongest cities. The Assyrians used massive siege machines to break through city gates. Once the gates were broken, the Assyrian army stormed into the city, and the battle continued in the streets. The Assyrian Empire soon took control of much of Mesopotamia. Assyrian kings built great capitals. One of them was the magnificent city of Nimrud. Assyrian kings ruled from magnificent palaces and governed the empire with iron discipline. Conquered peoples were forced to bring tribute and gifts to the Assyrian kings. The Assyrians ruled conquered cities with strict control to prevent rebellion. Assyrian kings recorded their victories through stone reliefs carved into palace walls. Eventually, Nineveh became the new capital of Assyria and grew into one of the largest cities in the world. Nineveh had become the largest and most magnificent city of the Assyrian Empire. Under King Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian Empire reached the height of its power. Ashurbanipal built a great library in Nineveh, where thousands of clay tablets were preserved. The Assyrians recorded their knowledge on clay tablets using cuneiform writing. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh survived this day thanks to the clay tablets preserved in the library of Nineveh. At its peak, the Assyrian Empire stretched from Egypt to Persia. But ruling such a vast empire was difficult, and many cities began to rebel against Assyrian rule. Eventually, the Babylonians and the Medes formed a powerful alliance against the Assyrian Empire. The Babylonian and Median armies marched together toward Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. In 612 BC, Nineveh was placed under siege, and one of the greatest battles in ancient history began. The siege lasted 4 days, and the mighty walls of Nineveh began to weaken. At last, the mighty walls of Nineveh collapsed, and enemy armies poured into the city. When Nineveh fell, the city was devastated, and the end of the Assyrian Empire was near. With the fall of Nineveh, the Assyrian Empire disappeared into the pages of history. From one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world, only ruins remained. The Assyrians left a deep mark on history with their powerful armies and advanced warfare techniques. Today, many artifacts of the Assyrian Empire are displayed in major museums around the world. Winged bull statues once guarded the entrances of Assyrian palaces. Artifacts recovered from Assyrian cities remain a vital source of knowledge for historians. We will continue exploring the mysteries of world history. Subscribe to the channel for upcoming episodes. Mesopotamia, the land where some of humanity's earliest civilizations were born. The rivers Euphrates and Tigris gave life to these fertile lands. For thousands of years, cities rose here and powerful kings ruled. And this region became the stage for the first great empires in human history. One of these cities was Babylon, rising along the Euphrates River. Over time, Babylon became one of the most powerful cities in Mesopotamia. Trade routes met here, and people gathered within its walls. For centuries, Babylon remained one of the most important centers of the region. But for a time, Babylon lived under the shadow of a far greater empire. This empire was the most feared power of the ancient Near East. Its armies were disciplined, and its warriors were ruthless. It was the Assyrian Empire ruling Mesopotamia with iron authority. The Assyrian Empire was one of the most powerful military states of the ancient world. Its armies were disciplined and its soldiers highly experienced. With iron weapons and war chariots, they spread fear across their enemies. Through this power, much of Mesopotamia fell under Assyrian control. As the Assyrian armies advanced, many cities became their targets. Rebellious cities faced brutal and relentless sieges. Walls were shattered and entire cities burned in flames. These ruthless wars made Assyria a feared power across the region. Yet no empire remains powerful forever. Years of wars and rebellions began to weaken the Assyrian state. The empire was vast, but that vastness became a weakness. Controlling uprisings across such a huge land was becoming harder and harder. As the Assyrian Empire weakened, a new hope began to rise in Babylon. The leading figures of the city were watching this opportunity closely. For the first time, Assyria's power seemed truly shaken. And in Babylon, some were preparing to rise for freedom. In 626 BC, a new leader emerged in Babylon. His name was Nabopolassar, and he began a rebellion against Assyrian rule. This uprising was more than just a revolt. It was the beginning of a great change. Because the people of Babylon wanted to reclaim their own destiny. Nabopolassar quickly secured his power in Babylon. The rebellion against Assyria grew into a full movement for independence. Eventually, Nabopolassar was proclaimed king of Babylon. With this, a new era for Babylon had begun. Babylon was not alone in the war against Assyria. Another rising power stood in the east, the Medes. A powerful alliance was formed between the Median king and Babylon. This alliance would change the fate of the Assyrian Empire. The Babylonian and Median armies began to move together. Their goal was to destroy the power of the Assyrian Empire. The two great armies marched across the lands of Mesopotamia. Their targets were the great cities at the heart of Assyria. Eventually, the armies reached Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. This city was one of the greatest and most powerful centers of the empire. With its massive walls and strong defenses, it was expected to resist for a long time. But the Babylonian and Median armies surrounded the city. In 612 BC, the fate of Nineveh was sealed. After a long siege, the mighty walls of the city collapsed. The Babylonian and Median armies entered the city. And with that, the heart of the Assyrian Empire had fallen. Once one of the most powerful cities in the world, Nineveh now lay in ruins. Palaces had fallen, and statues were shattered. The glorious Assyrian capital was sinking into silence. And with it, the mighty Assyrian Empire began to fade into history. With the fall of the Assyrian Empire, the balance of power in Mesopotamia changed. At the center of this change stood Babylon. The city began to grow and regain its strength. A new and glorious era for Babylon was beginning. The man behind Babylon's rise was King Nabopolassar. He would be remembered as the ruler who freed the city from Assyrian control. Under his rule, the Neo-Babylonian Empire began to grow stronger. Babylon was becoming the new power of Mesopotamia. Beside Nabopolassar grew a young prince. He would become one of the most famous kings in Babylonian history. His name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he would transform Babylon into one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar gained experience on the battlefield at a young age. He joined important campaigns at the head of Babylonian forces. His courage and military skill quickly drew attention. These experiences were preparing him to become a great king. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar ascended the throne of Babylon. The new king quickly secured control over the empire. His rule would begin one of the most powerful periods in Babylon's history. During Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Babylon entered a massive reconstruction era. The city expanded with enormous walls, palaces, and temples. Babylon soon became one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world. During Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Babylon grew into a powerful imperial center. The city became both a political and economic hub of the region. Babylon was now considered the heart of Mesopotamia. One of the most famous structures of Nebuchadnezzar's reign was the Ishtar Gate. It was decorated with blue glazed bricks and reliefs. The gate symbolized the power and magnificence of Babylon. Babylon was not only a magnificent city, but also a powerful fortress. The city was surrounded by enormous defensive walls. These walls protected Babylon from external threats. One of the most famous stories about Babylon is the Hanging Gardens. Ancient sources describe them as gardens built on massive terraces. They were said to be one of the most impressive wonders of the ancient world. Babylon was not only a powerful city, but also a major center of trade. Caravans from distant lands gathered within its markets. Through trade, Babylon became a wealthy and vibrant city. Babylon was also an important center of knowledge and science. Significant work was done, especially in astronomy. Babylonian priests observed the sky and carefully recorded the stars. As the years passed, Nebuchadnezzar began to grow old. His reign had created Babylon's most powerful era. But with the death of the great king, the empire would enter a new chapter. After Nebuchadnezzar's death, stability in Babylon began to decline. Several short-lived kings took the throne, and palace conflicts increased. This gradually weakened the strength of the empire. Meanwhile, a new power was rising in the east. Cyrus the Great of Persia was building a rapidly expanding empire. Soon, Babylon became one of his main targets. In 539 BC, the Persian army reached Babylon. The city fell into Persian hands with little resistance. And with that, the Neo-Babylonian Empire came to an end. But this story does not end here. Follow and subscribe to see what comes next. In the east of the ancient world, on the Iranian plateau, lived a people. These people would later be known as the Persians. And one day, they would build one of the greatest empires in history. At first, the Persians were not a great empire. For many years they lived under the rule of the Median Empire. But in these lands, a new power was about to rise. Soon a powerful leader emerged in these lands. His name was Cyrus, later known as Cyrus the Great. His leadership would completely change the fate of the Persians. In 550 BC, Cyrus launched a great rebellion against the Median king. The Persian army faced the Median forces on the Iranian plateau. This war would mark the beginning of the Persian Empire. Cyrus' army defeated the Median forces and achieved a great victory. This triumph marked the moment of Persian independence. And thus, the Achaemenid Persian Empire was born. After his victory, Cyrus continued his conquests. He marched west toward the powerful kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia. This campaign would greatly expand the Persian Empire. Cyrus's army reached Sardis, the capital of Lydia. The city was protected by strong walls, but the Persians began a siege. In the end, Sardis fell, and the kingdom of Lydia became part of the Persian Empire. After conquering Lydia, Cyrus turned his attention eastward. His next target was Babylon, the greatest city of Mesopotamia. This campaign would shape the future of the Persian Empire. The Persian army marched toward the heart of Mesopotamia. Their target was Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. For centuries, the city had been a powerful center of the region. In 539 BC, the Persian army reached Babylon. The city fell into Persian hands with little resistance. Mesopotamia now became part of the Persian Empire. Cyrus entered Babylon not just as a conqueror, but as a new ruler. He worked to maintain order in the city. This policy would define Persian rule. The conquest of Babylon greatly strengthened the Persian Empire. From Anatolia to Mesopotamia, vast lands were now under Persian control. The Persians had rapidly built a great empire. Cyrus's rule strengthened the foundations of the Persian Empire. The conquests were not only about land, they were also about building a strong system of governance. Cyrus ruled the empire for many years. After his death, the throne passed to a new king. The Persian Empire would continue to expand. Cambyses II, who took the throne, began new conquests. His target was Egypt, one of the strongest kingdoms of Africa. The Persian army marched south. In 525 BC, the Persian army conquered Egypt. This victory expanded the empire into Africa. The Persian Empire now stretched across 3 continents. One of the most important kings of Persia was Darius. His rule made the empire even stronger. Darius introduced major reforms. Darius launched massive construction projects. The city of Persepolis was built during this period. It became a symbol of Persian power. The Persians built a vast network of roads. The royal road connected distant regions of the empire. These routes improved trade and communication. At its greatest extent, the Persian Empire had become a vast power. Its lands stretched from India to Egypt. one of the first true super-empires of the ancient world had emerged. The Persians influenced the world not only through war, but also through trade. Their roads connected distant regions. This network strengthened the economy. The Persian Empire included many different peoples. These cultures continued living under Persian rule. This system helped the empire remain stable for a long time. One of the most famous Persian military units was the Immortals. This elite force always consisted of 10,000 soldiers. They were known as the strongest army of the empire. But in the West, the Persian Empire would face a new power. Greek city-states were rising along the Aegean coast. This encounter would lead to some of history's most famous battles. In 490 BC, Persian and Greek armies met at Marathon. It was one of the first major battles of the Greco-Persian Wars. Greek hoplites achieved an unexpected victory. Years later, King Xerxes launched a massive campaign. A huge Persian army marched toward Greece. This would become one of the greatest military expeditions of the ancient world. King Xerxes sent messengers to the Greek cities. The envoys arrived in Sparta, demanding submission. But the Spartans would not accept this threat. Preparations for war began in Sparta. King Leonidas gathered his warriors. The Spartans were ready to face the Persian army. The Persian Empire was advancing toward the Greek lands. When the news reached Sparta, preparations for war began. Spartan warriors started gathering in the city courtyard. Soon, King Leonidas arrived in the courtyard. He stood before the warriors and assessed the situation. The Persian army was marching toward Greece. Leonidas began carefully inspecting the warriors. He was choosing the strongest and most experienced soldiers, because they would face a massive Persian army. In the end, 300 Spartans were chosen. This small force would march with Leonidas to Thermopylae. They were preparing for one of the most famous battles in history. Leonidas and the 300 Spartans left Sparta. They marched to defend the lands of Greece. Their destination was the pass of Thermopylae. The Spartans arrived at the pass of Thermopylae. This narrow pass limited the movement of large armies. Leonidas chose it as the perfect place for defense. Soon the Persian army appeared on the horizon. Xerxes commanded a massive force, but the Spartans had no intention of retreating. At the pass of Thermopylae, Spartan warriors tried to stop the Persian army. King Leonidas and 300 Spartans resisted bravely. The battle began at the pass of Thermopylae. The Spartans fought in a tight phalanx formation. In the narrow pass, they managed to stop the Persian army. The Persian army attacked again and again, but the Spartans continued defending the pass. The battle lasted for days. Eventually, the Persians found a way around the pass. The Spartans were surrounded. Leonidas and his warriors chose to fight until the end. In the end, the Spartans were completely surrounded. King Leonidas and his warriors refused to retreat. They fought until the end and fell at Thermopylae. This moment became one of the most famous battle stories in history. The Persian navy met the Greek fleet at Salamis. In the narrow sea, the battle became a major defeat for Persia. This victory strengthened Greek resistance. Despite the Greek wars, the Persian Empire survived. The empire continued ruling its vast lands. But over time, its power slowly weakened. In the 4th century BC, a new power emerged in the west. Alexander the Great of Macedon marched eastward. His target was the Persian Empire. In 331 BC, the Battle of Gaugamela took place. This battle became the turning point for the Persian Empire. The Persian army was defeated and the empire began to collapse. The Battle of Gaugamela was a disaster for the Persians. Darius's army was forced to retreat. Alexander continued advancing deeper into the east, the heart of Persia. His army followed the royal road. The core of the Persian Empire was now in danger. One of the most magnificent cities of the Persian Empire was Persepolis. It served as the ceremonial capital of the Persian kings. The city symbolized Persian power. Alexander finally reached Persepolis. The Persian capital was now defenseless. The Macedonian army entered the city. The palaces of Persepolis were filled with immense wealth. Alexander seized the Persian treasures stored there. This victory increased his power even further. Soon the palaces of Persepolis were set on fire. Much of the city burned in flames. This moment symbolized the end of the Persian Empire. One of the greatest empires in the world had fallen. The throne of the Persian kings now stood empty. The balance of power in the ancient world had changed. Alexander now ruled a vast empire. The lands of Persia were under his control. But history would not end here. The Persian Empire would be remembered as one of history's greatest states. Its lands stretched across 3 continents. This scale made it a superpower of the ancient world. The story of history's greatest battles does not end here. Follow and subscribe to see what comes next.